This is a heavy task, but I've got the structure locked in. We're going for that creepypasta meets real-world testimonial vibe, the kind of story that makes people double-check their own locks after watching. Asterisk, I was a night security guard in an empty Chicago office building, and someone kept whispering my name from inside the elevator. Duh. The following account was pulled from a 2014 thread on a closed Illinois private security forum. The user, nightwatch_chi82, deleted their account shortly after posting this. He claimed this wasn't just a glitch in the building, it was a glitch in his reality. I never believed in the unseen. To me, Chicago was just wind, concrete, and the sound of the L train. I took a job at the Ravine Plaza, a 30-story glass monolith in the Loop, because it paid $20 an hour to sit in the lobby and watch monitors. It was supposed to be easy. For the first 3 months it was. I'd walk my rounds, flicking my flashlight into dark cubicles, feeling like the only soul in the world. But why did the air in the lobby always feel 10 degrees colder by midnight? It started on a Tuesday. I was sitting at the main desk when the light for elevator 4 flickered on the control panel. The building was empty. The cleaning crew had left at 10. I watched the digital display crawl. 20, 19, 18. It stopped at the lobby. The doors slid open with a soft chime. Empty. I figured it was a mechanical error, an old relay or a short circuit. But as the doors began to close, I heard it, a dry, raspy breath, like wind through dead leaves, saying my name. Why did it sound like it was standing right behind me? Marcus. The sound didn't come from the speakers, it came from the void of the elevator car. I froze. My skin crawled, that primal instinct telling me I was being hunted. I laughed it off at first. Lack of sleep plays tricks on the mind, right? I did my 2 a.m. rounds, avoiding elevator 4. I took the stairs to the 4th floor, my boots echoing against the concrete. When I reached the landing, I stopped. Every single office door on that floor, doors I had personally locked, was standing wide open. How could they all be unlatched at once? I pulled my radio. Dispatch, this is Marcus. I've got multiple unsecured doors on 4. Check the tapes. Static. Just heavy, rhythmic static that pulsed like a heartbeat. I stepped into the hallway, my flashlight beam shaking. The smell hit me then. Not dust, not cleaning fluid, but the smell of old, stagnant water. I shone my light into the break room. A chair was spinning slowly, as if someone had just stood up. I felt a gaze on the back of my neck, heavy and hateful. If I turned around, would I see the thing that was watching me? Retreated to the stairwell, but the door wouldn't budge. It was a heavy fire door, and it felt like someone was leaning their entire weight against it from the other side. I pounded on the metal. Hey, who's there? No answer. Only the sound of bare feet slapping against the linoleum in the hallway behind me. Slap, slap, slap. It was slow, deliberate. I ran for the elevators. I didn't care about the rules anymore. I just needed out. I hit the call button, and elevator 4 opened instantly. Why was it already waiting for me on the 4th floor? I jumped inside and mashed the L button. The doors started to slide shut, but a hand, gray, impossibly long and shimmering like heat haze, blocked the sensor. The doors hissed and retreated. There was no one in the hallway, just the empty, dark corridor. Then the whisper came again, but this time it was inside the car with me. It wasn't a voice, it was a vibration in my teeth. It said, "We've been waiting for a new house." I realized then that this wasn't a ghost. It was something older. Why did the floor numbers start counting up instead of down? 30, 40, 50. The Ravine Plaza only has 30 floors. The car began to shake. The lights flickered, and in the brief moments of darkness I saw him, a tall, thin shape standing in the corner of the elevator. He looked like a man, but his proportions were wrong. His arms reached past his knees, and his face was a smooth, featureless surface of shifting shadows. An insan numa saya. He wasn't breathing, yet the air was thick with the sound of his lungs. If I didn't find a way out, where would this machine take me? I started screaming, hitting every button. The emergency phone was dead. The saya moved closer, its shadow stretching across the floor until it touched my boots. I felt a coldness so intense it felt like burning. My vision began to blur. Just as the display hit 99, the elevator screeched to a halt. The doors groaned open. I didn't look out. I didn't wait. I dove through the gap and landed on hard concrete. I was back in the lobby. The sun was just beginning to hit the glass. Had I really been in that box for 4 hours? I didn't turn in my keys. I didn't wait for my paycheck. I walked out of those glass doors and never looked back. I heard later that the guard who replaced me disappeared during his second week. They found his flashlight and his radio inside elevator 4, but the security tapes for that night were nothing but static. Sometimes when I'm in a quiet building and I hear a chime, I freeze. I still wonder, did I actually escape, or is that thing still standing in the corner of my vision, waiting for the doors to close again? This account was originally posted to a private hiking and travel community board based out of Cardiff, Wales in early 2002. The user, Lost in Brecon, shared this as a warning to anyone looking for off-grid solitude. He deleted the post within 48 hours after several users pointed out that the cabin he described didn't appear on any official rental registries. He hasn't logged in since. I'm not a city person who gets spooked by a snapping twig or a hooting owl. I grew up in the suburbs of Portland. I know what the woods sound like at night. But there is a specific kind of silence in the Welsh countryside that feels less like peace and more like a held breath. My girlfriend Sarah and I wanted to disconnect. We found a small, stone-clad cabin near the edge of the Brecon Beacons. It was beautiful in that rugged, lonely way that looks great on Instagram. But why did the sheep in the neighboring field refuse to look at the house? We arrived on a Friday afternoon. The air was damp and smelled of peat and ancient stone. The cabin was basic: a kitchen, a small wood burner, and a bedroom with a massive floor-to-ceiling window that looked directly into a dense thicket of spruce trees. It was the kind of window that felt like a painting until the sun went down. As I unpacked, I noticed a row of deep scratches on the interior windowsill, almost as if someone had been trying to claw their way out. Why would someone be that desperate to leave? The first night was uneventful mostly. We drank wine and watched the fire die down. But around 3 a.m. I woke up to a temperature drop so sharp I could see my breath in the dim moonlight. The silence was absolute. No wind, no insects. Then, a soft wet sound hit the glass. Schlick. It was the sound of skin sliding against a window. I looked toward the woods, but the glass just reflected the dark room back at me. I tried to go back to sleep, but the feeling of being watched was like a physical weight on my chest. Was I just projecting my own nerves onto the dark? Saturday morning brought a thick, unnatural fog. I went outside to get more wood and found a circle of dead birds, mostly crows, laid out perfectly around the perimeter of the cabin. Their necks weren't broken. They just looked drained. I didn't tell Sarah. I didn't want to ruin the trip. But when I went back inside, I noticed the smell. It was a faint, metallic odor like old copper or blood coming from the bedroom. I checked the pipes, the floorboards, everything. Nothing was leaking. So why did the smell get stronger the closer I got to that massive window? By sunset, the fog hadn't lifted. It had thickened into a gray wall that pressed against the cabin. Sarah was on edge. She kept looking at the bedroom window, claiming she saw flashes of white moving between the trees. I told her it was just the mist catching the light, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. We locked the doors and sat in the kitchen. Then the power went out. Not a flicker, just a sudden, total death of every light. In the sudden pitch black, I heard a heavy thud from the bedroom. What if something had finally decided to come closer? I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight and clicked it on. The beam sliced through the darkness, illuminating the bedroom. Sarah gasped, her hand over her mouth. On the large window, about 5 feet up, was a massive, greasy smear. It looked like the imprint of a forehead and a nose, but the proportions were wrong. The nose was too long, the forehead too flat. And then, as we watched, another smear appeared, a slow, rhythmic pressing of skin against the glass from the outside. If there was no ledge for a person to stand on, how was it reaching that height? "Don't look at it," I whispered, pulling Sarah toward the kitchen. We sat on the floor, our backs against the cabinets. The sound started then. It wasn't a knock. It was a persistent, frantic scratching, like 1,000 insects trying to find a crack in the stone. And underneath that, a whisper. It wasn't in English, or even Welsh. It was a guttural, vibrating hum that seemed to come from the ground itself. It felt like the house was being claimed by something that had lived in these woods for centuries. Why did it feel like the walls were getting thinner by the second? I decided to be brave. I stood up and walked back to the bedroom, the flashlight shaking in my hand. I aimed the beam directly at the glass. At first, I saw nothing but the mist. Then, it pressed forward. A face. It had no hair, no ears, and its skin was the color of a drowned man. Its eyes were huge, milky orbs that didn't reflect my light. They absorbed it. It wasn't a monster. It looked like a man that had been stretched and twisted until he was something else. A Jinn of the hills. Why was it smiling at me with teeth that looked like jagged pieces of flint? The creature didn't move. It just pressed its face harder against the glass until the skin turned white and the pane began to creak. I could see the condensation from its breath on the outside, but it wasn't coming from a nose. It was coming from pores all over its skin. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to open the window. A voice in my head, soft and sweet like a mother's lullaby, told me it was cold outside and I should let the poor thing in. I reached for the latch. My fingers touched the cold metal. Why was my own hand betraying me like this? Sarah screamed my name, breaking the trance. I lunged back, dropping the flashlight. We spent the rest of the night in the corner of the kitchen, clutching a steak knife and a fire poker. Every few minutes, the schlick sound would return to a different window. The kitchen, the small bathroom, the front door. It was circling us, tasting the perimeter, looking for the one lock we might have forgotten. The sun felt like it took years to rise. When the first gray light finally bled through the fog, the scratching stopped. Had it finally gone back to the earth? We didn't pack. We threw our bags into the car and drove. As I pulled out of the gravel drive, I looked into the rearview mirror. Standing in the middle of the road, perfectly still, was a tall, thin figure wrapped in the fog. It wasn't a person. It was too tall, its arms hanging nearly to its ankles. It didn't chase us, it just watched. When I looked back a second later, the road was empty. I've never gone back to Wales. I can't even look at large windows at night anymore without imagining a pale, flat face pressing against them. Does it still have my scent?